shadows. Tyler Hawkins moved through his empty house like a specter, his footsteps silent on the hardwood floors he'd installed with his own hands 15 years ago. The military precision that had kept him alive through 12 tours of duty now served a different purpose: hunting prey in his own home. At 42, Tyler carried himself with the controlled grace of a predator. His graying temples and weathered face told stories of desert storms and mountain caves, of targets eliminated from impossible distances. But tonight, his pale blue eyes held a coldness that would have made his former Taliban enemies soil themselves. The house felt foreign without the warmth it once held. Pictures of happier times mocked him from every wall: his wedding day to Rebecca, their 10th anniversary in Maui, family barbecues where her laughter had been the soundtrack to his peace. Now he knew it had all been an elaborate performance. 3 weeks ago, he'd returned early from a private security contract in Colombia, expecting to surprise his wife of 16 years. Instead, he discovered text messages on her carelessly abandoned phone. Messages that painted a picture of betrayal so complete, so calculated, that it made the enemy ambushes he'd survived seem like child's play. Rebecca wasn't just cheating, she was planning. Planning to take everything he'd built, everything he'd bled for. The house, his savings, his reputation. She and her muscle-bound lover had mapped out Tyler's destruction with the thoroughness of a military operation. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated their enemy. Tyler had spent the last 3 weeks becoming invisible in his own life. He'd hired a private investigator named Cruz Valdez, a former Delta Force operator who specialized in matrimonial warfare. Cruz had provided photographic evidence, financial records, and most importantly, a complete dossier on Rebecca's new boyfriend, Brad Kowalski, 34, originally from Detroit. 6'5", 260 pounds of steroid-enhanced muscle. He owned a chain of supplement stores that barely turned a profit, lived in a rented penthouse he couldn't afford, and had a gambling problem that had cost him his previous marriage. He was everything Tyler wasn't: loud, flashy, and desperate to prove his worth through intimidation. What Brad didn't know was that Rebecca had specifically chosen him as her weapon against Tyler. She'd researched her husband's psychological profile, understanding that his military mind would see Brad as a direct physical threat. She wanted Tyler to react violently, to give her grounds for a restraining order and a favorable divorce settlement. But Rebecca had made the same mistake every enemy combatant Tyler had ever faced. She'd assumed she understood him. Tyler's phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca: "Won't be home tonight. Girls' night with Monica. Don't wait up." Monica was Rebecca's sister, and Tyler had already confirmed she was in Phoenix visiting their mother. Another lie in a web of deception that stretched back months, maybe years. He opened his laptop and reviewed the timeline Cruz had assembled. Rebecca's affair had begun 8 months ago, but her planning went deeper. She'd been slowly transferring money to accounts Tyler didn't know about. She'd been documenting every argument, every moment of tension in their marriage, building a case that would paint him as an unstable veteran prone to violence. The irony wasn't lost on him. She was creating the very monster she claimed he already was. Tyler's reflection caught in the darkened window, a man stripped of illusions, reduced to his most essential elements. In the desert, they'd called him Ghost for his ability to appear from nowhere and vanish without a trace. Tonight, the ghost was coming home. He picked up his encrypted phone and sent a single text to Cruz: "Phase 1 is go." The response came immediately: "Target acquired." They're at the Meridian Hotel, room 412. Tyler smiled for the first time in weeks, but it wasn't an expression anyone would want to see. It was the smile of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey after a long, patient hunt. He walked to his home office and opened the gun safe hidden behind his bronze star and purple heart. Inside, carefully maintained and loaded, were the tools of his former trade. But tonight wouldn't require a rifle. Tonight called for something more personal. As he prepared for the confrontation that would change everything, Tyler felt the familiar calm that preceded every successful mission. Rebecca and Brad thought they were playing a game of deception and manipulation. They were about to learn they'd brought knives to a gunfight with a professional killer. Chapter 2: The Web Unravels. The Meridian Hotel's elevator climbed silently toward the 4th floor as Tyler reviewed his intelligence one final time. Through Cruz's surveillance, he'd learned that Brad wasn't just Rebecca's lover. He was her co-conspirator in a scheme that went far beyond simple adultery. Rebecca had met Brad at his supplement store 6 months after joining the upscale gym he sponsored. What began as flirtation had evolved into a calculated partnership. Brad needed money to cover his mounting gambling debts, and Rebecca needed muscle to intimidate Tyler into a settlement that would leave him financially ruined. But their plan had deeper layers. Rebecca had been secretly recording their conversations, painting Tyler as a volatile veteran who frightened her. She'd documented every raised voice, every moment of frustration, building evidence for the restraining order she planned to file. Brad would then escalate conflicts, forcing Tyler into situations where his military training might take over. The goal was simple: provoke Tyler into violence, get him arrested, and claim the house and his substantial savings account as the victim of an abusive marriage. Tyler had to admire the sophistication of it. Rebecca had studied him like an enemy combatant, understanding his triggers and pressure points. She knew his sense of honor would prevent him from simply walking away from their marriage. She'd counted on his loyalty, his belief in their vows, to keep him trapped while she systematically destroyed him. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 4th floor. Tyler moved down the hallway with practiced silence, his senses hyper-alert. He could hear voices from room 412, Rebecca's familiar laugh mixed with Brad's deeper tones. They were celebrating, probably toasting their success at manipulating the dangerous war veteran. Through his earpiece, Cruz's voice crackled softly. "Hotel security is clean. 2 guards downstairs, both focused on the lobby. You've got a clear exit through the service stairs." Tyler positioned himself outside the door, listening. Rebecca was explaining their next phase to Brad, her voice animated with excitement. "Tyler still thinks I'm with Monica. Tomorrow, I'll file the papers. I've got 3 months of documented incidents. Him losing his temper, the nightmares, his obsession with those damn guns. My lawyer says it's enough for a temporary restraining order." Brad's response rumbled with satisfaction. "And that's when I make my appearance. Show up at the house. Make sure he understands the new reality. Guy's been living in a fantasy where respect comes from uniform. Time he learned what real power looks like. Just remember," Rebecca cautioned, "we need him to throw the first punch. Everything depends on him looking like the aggressor." Tyler's jaw tightened. They weren't just destroying his marriage. They were constructing an elaborate frame job that would cost him his freedom, his reputation, and his future. He'd heard enough. Tyler used the keycard Cruz had acquired from his contact in hotel management. The lock disengaged with a soft click, and he stepped into the suite. Rebecca and Brad were on the couch, documents spread across the coffee table between champagne glasses. Rebecca wore the red dress he'd bought her for their anniversary 2 years ago. Brad was shirtless, his steroid-enhanced physique on full display. They looked up as Tyler entered, and the color drained from Rebecca's face. "Tyler," she gasped, her voice catching. "What are you doing here?" Brad stood slowly, his massive frame unfolding like a threat. "You weren't invited, old man. Time to leave." Tyler remained perfectly still, his expression neutral. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by and meet my replacement." Rebecca scrambled to gather the papers, but Tyler had already seen enough. Financial documents, property assessments, a timeline of fabricated incidents. The complete blueprint of his destruction. "This isn't what it looks like," Rebecca said, her voice taking on the tone she'd used during their marriage whenever she'd been caught in a smaller lie. "Really?" Tyler's voice remained conversational, almost curious. "Because it looks like my wife and her boyfriend planning to destroy my life through fraud and manufactured evidence." Brad stepped forward, flexing his shoulders in a display of intimidation that might have worked on someone else. "You need to walk away right now, before things get ugly." Tyler smiled, the same cold expression that had been the last thing many enemies had seen. "Define ugly, Brad." The bodybuilder's confidence flickered for a moment, some primal instinct recognizing the predator beneath Tyler's calm exterior. But ego and steroids overrode survival instincts. "I define it as you leaving through that door on your own, or me throwing you through the window." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate the clarity, but I think there's been a misunderstanding about who's in control of this situation." He stepped closer, and Brad instinctively moved to block him, his massive fists clenching. This was the moment Rebecca had orchestrated. Tyler appearing as the aggressor, Brad defending himself, everything caught on the hotel security cameras. But Tyler didn't strike. Instead, he spoke just loud enough for the recording device he knew Rebecca was carrying to pick up his words. Tell me, Brad, does Rebecca know about your gambling problem? The one that cost you your marriage and put you in debt to some very unpleasant people. Brad's face went pale. What are you talking about? Marcus Torino sends his regards. He's very interested in collecting the 120,000 you owe him. The name hit Brad like a physical blow. Marcus Torino was Detroit's most feared loan shark, a man whose debt collection methods made headlines in the crime section. Rebecca looked confused, but Brad understood immediately. Somehow, Tyler had found his deepest, most dangerous secret. How do you? Brad started, then stopped, realizing the implications. Tyler's smile widened. I told you there was a misunderstanding. You thought you were the hunters in this little game. He turned toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Rebecca? Monica called. She wanted to thank you for the Christmas card you sent to Phoenix. Funny thing about phone records, they're admissible in court. As Tyler walked away, he heard Rebecca's sharp intake of breath and Brad's confused questions. They were beginning to understand that their perfect plan had been compromised from the beginning. But they had no idea how completely Tyler had turned their own trap against them. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. The parking garage beneath Tyler's office building had been chosen for a reason. Concrete walls, limited exits, and no surveillance cameras in the specific corner where he'd arranged to meet Brad. Some conversations required privacy. Tyler arrived first, positioning himself with clear sight lines and an escape route. Old habits died hard, and tonight those habits might save his life. Brad's BMW roared down the ramp 15 minutes later, its engine echoing off the concrete walls like thunder. The bodybuilder emerged from the car with the swagger of a man accustomed to intimidating his way through problems. But his confidence was manufactured now. Tyler could see it in the tension around his eyes, the way his massive hands clenched and unclenched. The revelation about Marcus Torino had shaken him, made him realize this wasn't the simple intimidation job he'd signed up for. You wanted to talk, Brad called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. Here I am. Tyler stepped out of the shadows, moving with the fluid grace that marked him as dangerous to anyone who knew what to look for. I wanted to give you a chance to walk away. Last chance, actually. Brad laughed, but it sounded forced. Walk away from what? From Rebecca? From the best thing that's happened to me in years. From the woman who's using you as a weapon against me, then planning to discard you the moment she gets my money. The words hit their target. Tyler could see the doubt flickering across Brad's features, the same doubt that had been growing since their conversation at the hotel. You're lying, Brad said, but his conviction was wavering. Tyler pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Rebecca's voice filled the garage, crystal clear. Brad's useful for now, but I can't be seen with a loser like him long term. Once Tyler's out of the picture and I have the settlement, I'll find an excuse to get rid of him. Brad's face darkened with fury and betrayal. Where did you get that? She's been recording you too, Brad. Building evidence that you coerced her into the affair, that you threatened her if she didn't help you get to my money. You're not her partner. You're her scapegoat. The truth hit Brad like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on the money, so desperate to solve his gambling problem, that he'd never considered Rebecca might be playing a deeper game. But that doesn't change anything, Brad said, his voice hardening. I still need that money. Marcus isn't going to care about hurt feelings when he comes collecting. Tyler nodded. Which brings us to why we're really here. He gestured around the empty garage. Privacy. No witnesses. No cameras. Just two men settling things the way men do. Brad's confidence returned, bolstered by the familiar prospect of physical violence. This was his element. Intimidation through superior size and strength. Be smart and walk away before I break your neck, Brad growled, flexing his biceps in a display that had worked on countless gym rivals and bar opponents. She doesn't want you anymore, old man. Tyler smiled calmly, the expression that had preceded the death of so many enemies in so many foreign battlefields. Funny thing about muscles, they don't stop bullets. And after 12 years as a Navy SEAL sniper, I've never missed a target. Brad's cocky grin faded as a red laser that appeared on his forehead, dancing slightly as his heart rate spiked with sudden terror. Then it happened. The laser vanished, but Tyler's hand remained steady on the concealed pistol that had created it. Brad stood frozen, finally understanding the difference between gym strength and combat lethality. "I could end you right here," Tyler said conversationally. "Self-defense. You threatened me. I felt fear for my life. With your history of violence and steroid abuse, no jury would convict me." Brad's breathing was shallow, his massive frame trembling slightly. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand your situation. Marcus Torino knows where you are. Rebecca is planning to throw you under the bus, and I have the skills to make you disappear without a trace." Tyler holstered his weapon but kept his hand ready. "Or, you can take option 2. "What's option 2? Tyler pulled out an envelope and tossed it at Brad's feet. "Plane ticket to Mexico City. 20,000 in cash. Enough to start over somewhere Marcus will never find you." Brad stared at the envelope like it might explode. "Why would you help me?" "Because I don't want to kill you, Brad. I want something else." Tyler's smile turned predatory. "I want you to disappear completely. Leave Rebecca to face the consequences of her choices alone. Let her explain to her lawyer why her muscle walked away. Let her deal with the financial mess she's created without her intimidation factor." Brad picked up the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was exactly what Tyler had promised: a ticket and enough money to start fresh. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just consequences. If you ever come back, if you ever contact Rebecca again, if you so much as think about causing me problems, I'll find you. And when I do, there won't be any offers of mercy." Brad looked around the garage, finally understanding that he'd been completely outmaneuvered. Rebecca had used him, Tyler had trapped him, and his only choice now was exile or death. "The plane leaves in 3 hours, Tyler said. "I suggest you don't miss it." As Brad walked toward his car, Tyler called out one final time. "Tell me, Brad, did you really think you could intimidate someone who spent 12 years hunting the most dangerous men on Earth?" Brad didn't answer. He didn't need to. His broken posture and quick retreat said everything necessary. Tyler watched the BMW disappear up the ramp, then pulled out his phone to call crews. "Target 1 is neutralized," he said. "Time to move to phase 2. Rebecca was about to learn what happened when you declared war on a professional soldier. And unlike Brad, she wouldn't be offered the mercy of exile. She'd created a monster, and now she was going to meet him." Chapter 4: Gathering Intelligence. Tyler's war room occupied the basement of his house, a space Rebecca had never been allowed to enter. Steel-reinforced walls contained his most sensitive equipment: surveillance monitors, communications gear, and detailed maps of his target's daily routines. Cruz sat across from him at the tactical planning table, spreading out photographs and documents like a general preparing for battle. "Brad's confirmed on the Mexico City flight," Cruz reported. "Customs shows him clearing immigration 2 hours ago. He won't be coming back." Tyler nodded, studying the surveillance photos of Rebecca's activities over the past week. Without Brad's intimidating presence, she'd become increasingly desperate, making mistakes that revealed the full scope of her deception. "She's meeting with 3 different lawyers," Cruz continued, "shopping for someone willing to pursue the fraud case even without her muscle backing her up." Tyler examined a photo of Rebecca leaving a downtown law office, her face tight with frustration. "Any takers?" 2 of them showed her the door once they realized how thin her evidence was. But the third one, Harvey Gillespie, he's different. Hungry. Takes cases other lawyers won't touch. Harvey Gillespie specialized in representing clients in high-conflict divorces, particularly cases involving veterans with PTSD claims. His reputation was built on aggressive tactics and media manipulation, turning divorce proceedings into public battles that destroyed his opponents' reputations. "Gillespie's already filed preliminary papers," Cruz said. "Restraining order request, asset freeze, the whole package. He's betting that even if the evidence is weak, the court will err on the side of caution when it comes to protecting an abused wife from a dangerous veteran." Tyler felt the familiar coldness settling over him, the same detachment that had made him so effective in combat. "What's his weakness?" Cruz smiled grimly. "His ego. Gillespie can't resist a high-profile case, especially one that might get immediate attention. He's already talking to reporters about representing the victim of veteran domestic violence." Tyler studied the tactical situation. Rebecca had moved from manipulation to open warfare, using the legal system as her weapon. But like every enemy he'd faced, she'd revealed her position by attacking. "She's staying at her sister's house," Cruz continued. "Karen Walsh, divorced, 2 kids, lives in Riverside Heights. Decent neighborhood, but Karen's struggling financially since her divorce. Tyler reviewed the file on Rebecca's sister. Karen had been his ally during the early years of his marriage, someone who'd welcomed him into Rebecca's family. The betrayal cut deeper knowing that Rebecca was now using Karen's financial desperation to hide from consequences. Karen doesn't know the full story, Cruz noted. Rebecca's told her that you've become violent and unstable. Karen believes she's protecting her sister from an abusive husband. Tyler closed the file, his decision made. Then Karen needs to learn the truth. But carefully, she's innocent in this. Cruz nodded. What about Rebecca's finances? The hidden accounts. Tyler pulled up bank records on his laptop. Over the past 8 months, Rebecca had systematically moved money from their joint accounts to a private account in her maiden name. Small amounts, spread across different institutions, nearly impossible to track without specialized software. She's got about $40,000 hidden away, Tyler said. Money she stole from our accounts, plus cash advances on credit cards I didn't know she'd opened. Credit card fraud, financial theft during marriage proceedings. That's serious jail time if prosecuted correctly. Tyler's smile was sharp as a blade. Rebecca always was good with money. She just never considered what happens when someone with my resources decides to audit her activities. The next phase of his plan required precision timing. Rebecca was counting on the legal system's bias toward protecting women from potentially violent veterans. She expected Tyler to react emotionally, to make mistakes that would validate her portrayal of him as unstable. Instead, he was going to give her exactly what she thought she wanted and trap her with it. I need you to do something that might seem counterproductive, Tyler told Cruz. I want you to make Rebecca feel like she's winning. Cruz raised an eyebrow. Explain. Contact Harvey Gillespie through back channels. Let it slip that I'm struggling financially, that the divorce is breaking me emotionally. Feed him information that makes him think he can go for the throat. You want him to get aggressive? Tyler nodded. I want him to overreach. Push for everything. The house, my savings, even my pension. Make demands so extreme that they reveal Rebecca's true motives. Cruz understood immediately. If Gillespie gets too greedy, it shows this isn't about escaping an abusive marriage. It's about taking everything you own. Exactly. And once that's established in court records, Rebecca's credibility collapses. Her story changes from domestic violence victim to financial predator. Tyler stood and walked to a wall map showing Rebecca's daily routine. Her gym, her favorite coffee shop, the lawyer's offices she'd been visiting. What's Rebecca's greatest weakness? Her need to be perceived as the victim. Cruz answered immediately. She's built her entire case around being the innocent wife betrayed by a dangerous veteran. Tyler traced Rebecca's route on the map. Then we give her a chance to prove it. In front of witnesses, with cameras rolling. In a way that exposes her true nature to everyone who matters. Cruz leaned forward, intrigued. What did you have in mind? Tyler's smile was cold as winter. Rebecca thinks she understands psychological warfare. Time to show her what the real thing looks like. He turned to Cruz, his pale eyes holding the same intensity that had once terrorized enemies across 3 continents. She wanted to create a monster to justify her betrayal. Let's give her one, but not the kind she expected. Chapter 5, Setting the Trap. The Riverside Community Center hosted a weekly support group for military spouses dealing with post-deployment relationship issues. Rebecca had been attending for 6 weeks, using the sessions to build her narrative of being married to an unstable veteran. Tyler sat in his car across the street, watching through binoculars as Rebecca performed her weekly ritual of victimhood. She'd arrive early, position herself where she'd be most visible to the group facilitator, and spend the session carefully constructing her image as a suffering wife. She's got them completely convinced. Cruz's voice crackled through Tyler's earpiece. I've been monitoring the sessions through our contact inside. Rebecca's become their poster child for spousal abuse by veterans with PTSD. Tyler watched Rebecca emerge from the community center, surrounded by supportive women who viewed her as brave for staying in an abusive marriage as long as she had. Their sympathy was genuine, which made Rebecca's manipulation even more despicable. Phase 1 is complete, Tyler said. Harvey Gillespie filed the restraining order this morning, along with a motion for emergency asset seizure. He's demanding the house, my savings, and temporary alimony of $4,000 a month. Cruz whistled softly. That's aggressive, even for him. Too aggressive. The judge is already skeptical. There's no police record, no hospital visits, no documented history of violence. Just Rebecca's word and a bunch of fabricated incidents. Tyler started his engine as Rebecca's car pulled away from the community center. Time for Rebecca to meet the monster she created. The carefully choreographed encounter would take place at Morrison's Coffee, Rebecca's favorite morning stop. Tyler had studied her routine for weeks. She arrived at 8:15 every Tuesday, ordered the same elaborate latte, and spent an hour working on her tablet in the corner booth. Today would be different. Tyler entered Morrison's at 8:20, 5 minutes after Rebecca had settled into her usual spot. He ordered black coffee and took a table with clear sight lines to both Rebecca and the security cameras crews had confirmed were operational. Rebecca looked up from her tablet and went pale when she saw him. This was perfect. Her reaction would be captured on camera, along with everything that followed. Tyler approached her table slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. Every movement was calculated to appear reasonable to observers while triggering Rebecca's coached responses. "Hello, Rebecca," he said calmly, stopping just outside what courts would consider her personal space. Rebecca's voice carried perfectly to the other patrons. "Tyler, you're not supposed to be here. The restraining order hasn't been served yet." Tyler interrupted gently. "Your lawyer jumped the gun. I can legally be anywhere you are until the papers are officially delivered." Rebecca's hands trembled as she reached for her phone, the motion designed to make her appear threatened. "I'm calling the police." "Of course you are," Tyler said, his voice carrying just enough volume for nearby tables to hear. "That's always been your solution to problems. Call someone else to handle them." The coffee shop had gone quiet, other patrons sensing drama, but not understanding its nature. This was exactly what Tyler needed. Witnesses who would remember his calm demeanor versus Rebecca's apparent terror. "You're scaring me," Rebecca said, her voice breaking in what Tyler recognized as a practiced performance. Tyler sat down across from her without invitation, the movement slow and non-threatening. "Am I? Or are you putting on a show for our audience?" Rebecca's eyes darted around the coffee shop, confirming that people were watching. Her performance was working. Several patrons looked ready to intervene on her behalf. "You're doing it again," Rebecca said, her voice rising. "The intimidation, the threats. This is exactly why I had to file for protection." Tyler leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conversational level that cameras would still pick up, but that required witnesses to strain to hear. "Tell me, Rebecca, which threats? When did I threaten you? Give me one specific example that isn't something you invented for your lawyers." Rebecca's composure cracked for just a moment, long enough for Tyler to see the calculation behind her fear. She was realizing that he was controlling this encounter, not her. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "I know what you're capable of. What you did overseas." Tyler smiled sadly, an expression that would read as regret to observers, but that Rebecca would recognize as predatory. "What I did overseas was serve my country. What I'm doing now is protecting myself from a woman who's trying to destroy my life through lies and manipulation." The coffee shop manager approached their table, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Excuse me, folks, but you're making other customers nervous. Maybe you could take this conversation outside." Tyler stood immediately, his compliance making him appear reasonable. "Of course. I apologize for any disruption." Rebecca remained seated, playing her final card. "I don't feel safe leaving with him. Could someone call the police?" Tyler looked around the coffee shop, making eye contact with several witnesses. "Rebecca, I haven't touched you, raised my voice, or done anything threatening. These people can confirm that." Several patrons nodded, their expressions showing confusion about why Rebecca seemed so terrified of such a calm interaction. Tyler placed a $20 bill on the table to cover Rebecca's coffee. "I'll leave first. You can stay as long as you need to feel safe." As he walked toward the door, Tyler heard Rebecca making frantic phone calls. First to Harvey Gillespie, then to 911, reporting that her estranged husband had violated a restraining order that hadn't been served and had threatened her in ways she couldn't specifically articulate. Outside, Cruz was waiting in his surveillance van. Beautiful work. She looked completely unhinged by the end. Tyler got into his own car, satisfied with the morning's results. She'll spin this as intimidation, but the witnesses saw something different. A calm man and a hysterical woman performing for an audience. His phone buzzed with a call from his lawyer, David Chun, who'd been retained to handle the divorce proceedings. "Tyler, I just got a call from Harvey Gillespie. He's claiming you violated the restraining order and physically threatened Rebecca at a coffee shop." Tyler smiled. "Good. Tell him I look forward to examining the security footage and witness statements in court. And David, make sure to subpoena the coffee shop's cameras. The footage will be very educational." As he drove away from Morrison's, Tyler felt the satisfaction of a perfectly executed operation. Rebecca had played her part exactly as he'd predicted, but in doing so, she'd revealed the calculated nature of her victimhood. Phase 2 was complete. Now came the hard part, destroying her completely while making it look like she'd destroyed herself. Chapter 6. The Squeeze begins. Harvey Gillespie's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, its floor-to-ceiling windows designed to intimidate opposing counsel with views of the city skyline. Tyler sat across from his own lawyer, David Chun, reviewing depositions that would shape the next phase of his campaign. "Gillespie's in trouble," David said, spreading documents across the conference table. "The coffee shop incident backfired spectacularly. Security footage shows you being completely calm while Rebecca acted like she was being stalked by a serial killer." Tyler studied the transcripts from witness interviews. 3 customers had described Rebecca as hysterical and performing for attention, while unanimously characterizing Tyler as polite and non-threatening. "Better yet," David continued, "the police report from Rebecca's 911 call contradicts her sworn deposition. She told the cops you physically cornered her, but the footage clearly shows you maintaining distance and leaving when asked." Tyler nodded, but his expression remained focused. This was just the opening move. Gillespie's smart enough to regroup. "What's his next play?" David pulled up bank records on his laptop. "He's going after your finances hard. Filed motions to freeze all your accounts, claiming you're hiding assets and preparing to flee the country." Tyler reviewed the financial motions, noting their aggressiveness. "He's overreaching. No judge will freeze accounts based on speculation, especially when Rebecca's the one who's been moving money around secretly." "That's where it gets interesting," David said, his expression grim. "Gillespie doesn't know about Rebecca's hidden accounts. She's been lying to her own lawyer about the marital assets." Tyler felt the familiar satisfaction of watching an enemy's position collapse. "So when we reveal Rebecca's financial deception in court, it destroys her credibility and exposes Gillespie to sanctions for filing frivolous motions." "Exactly. But there's more." David opened another file. "Rebecca's been meeting with Marcus Torino's people." The name hit Tyler like ice water. Marcus Torino, the Detroit loan shark who'd been hunting Brad, was now involved in Tyler's domestic situation. "Explain." David showed him surveillance photos Cruz had provided. Rebecca entering a restaurant known to be a front for Torino's operations, sitting across from a man identified as Vincent Scarano, Torino's lieutenant in charge of debt collection. "Best we can tell, Rebecca reached out to Torino after Brad disappeared. She's trying to use you as bait, convince Torino that you're responsible for Brad's vanishing act, that you have information about Brad's whereabouts." Tyler studied the photographs, his tactical mind analyzing the implications. "She's playing with forces she doesn't understand. Torino isn't some gym bully she can manipulate. It gets worse. Scarano's been asking questions about your military background, your financial situation, your daily routine. Rebecca's giving them intelligence on you." Tyler felt the cold rage that had sustained him through countless combat missions. Rebecca had crossed a line that put him in mortal danger, involving organized crime in their personal dispute. What does Torino want? Brad owed him $120,000. With Brad gone, Torino wants to collect from someone. Rebecca's convinced him that you either know where Brad is or have assets worth pursuing. Tyler stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city where somewhere, dangerous men were planning to collect a debt he didn't owe from money he'd never stolen. "This changes everything," he said finally. "Rebecca's not just trying to destroy my marriage and finances. She's putting my life at risk." David closed the files, his expression worried. "What do you want to do?" Tyler turned back to face his lawyer, and David was startled by the transformation in his client's demeanor. Gone was the measured, careful approach of a man working within legal boundaries. In its place was something far more dangerous, a professional killer who'd been threatened by amateurs playing games they couldn't win. "I want you to accelerate the divorce proceedings. file counter motions exposing Rebecca's financial fraud, her fabricated evidence, her perjury, and sworn statements. Make it clear that she's the predator in this marriage, not the victim. David nodded, making notes. What about Torino? Tyler's smile was sharp as a blade. Marcus Torino thinks he's dealing with a suburban husband who can be intimidated into paying someone else's debts. Time to educate him about the difference between a target and a threat. He pulled out his encrypted phone and sent a text to Cruz. Phase 3 is active. Torino protocols in effect. The response came immediately. Copy that. Switching to combat operations. Tyler looked back at David, who was staring at him with newfound wariness. David, I need you to understand something. Rebecca has escalated this beyond divorce court. She's brought organized crime into my home, threatened my life to collect money I don't owe. That changes the rules of engagement. David swallowed hard. Tyler, whatever you're planning. I'm planning to survive, Tyler interrupted. Everything else is just details. As he left the law office, Tyler felt the familiar weight of preparing for battle. Rebecca thought she'd gained an advantage by involving Torino's people. Instead, she'd given Tyler legal justification for responses that would have been excessive against a cheating spouse, but were perfectly reasonable against organized crime threats. She'd wanted to create a monster to justify her betrayal. She was about to meet the real one. Chapter 7. The Reckoning begins. Marcus Torino's restaurant, Salvatore's, sat in the heart of Detroit's Little Italy like a cancer disguised as fine dining. Tyler approached the building at sunset, his practiced eye cataloging exits, sight lines, and potential threats. This wasn't a social call. Inside, the maitre d' led him to a private dining room where Marcus Torino held court. The loan shark was smaller than Tyler had expected, mid-50s, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. The kind of man who ordered others to commit violence while keeping his own hands clean. Vincent Scarano flanked his boss, a mountain of muscle and scar tissue who'd clearly done the hands-on work for decades. Two other men sat against the far wall, their positioning suggesting professional security rather than simple intimidation. Mr. Hawkins, Torino said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Tyler sat down, his movements controlled and alert. Let's skip the pleasantries, Marcus. You have a problem with Brad Kowalski. I'm not him. I don't owe you money, and I'm not responsible for his debts. Torino cut into his veal with surgical precision. Your wife seems to think otherwise. She's convinced that you know where Brad disappeared to, that you might have convinced him to run without settling his obligations. Tyler leaned back in his chair, projecting calm confidence. My wife is a liar who's trying to manipulate you into threatening me. She's using your reputation to intimidate me in a divorce proceeding. Scarano started to speak, but Torino silenced him with a gesture. Perhaps, Torino said thoughtfully, but the debt remains. Brad owes me money, and when people disappear owing me money, I look for alternative sources of collection. Tyler smiled coldly. I understand you're a businessman, Marcus. So let me explain the business reality of this situation. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow made him more threatening than if he'd shouted. I'm not some suburban husband you can intimidate. I'm a former Navy SEAL with 12 years of combat experience and a very specific set of skills. If you or your people threaten me, you won't get your money. You'll get a war you can't win. Scarano bristled at the perceived disrespect, but Torino studied Tyler with newfound interest. You know, Torino said, your wife mentioned you might say something like that. She said you suffer from PTSD, that you make threats you can't back up because you're mentally unstable. Tyler's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made Scarano unconsciously step back. Vincent, Tyler said, addressing the enforcer directly, how many men have you killed? Scarano blinked, caught off guard by the question. What? It's a simple question. In your career as a collector for Marcus, how many people have you actually killed? Not beaten, not intimidated, killed. Scarano looked to his boss, uncertain how to respond. Tyler nodded. I thought so. Let me answer for you. I've killed 47 people in direct combat, not counting drone strikes or artillery calls. 47 men who were trying to kill me, in places where the only law was who was faster and more ruthless. The room had gone completely silent. Tyler reached into his jacket slowly, withdrawing a manila envelope. This contains photographs of your home, Marcus. Your wife's daily routine. Vincent's apartment building. The school where your daughter teaches third grade. Torino's face went pale as he opened the envelope. Inside were surveillance photos showing his most private moments. Entering his supposedly secret penthouse, his wife shopping at markets she thought were secure, his daughter leaving the elementary school where she worked. I had these taken this morning. Tyler continued conversationally. If I can get close enough to photograph them, I can get close enough to end them. Scarano's hand moved toward his jacket, but Tyler's next words stopped him cold. Vincent, there's a laser sight trained on your chest right now. My spotter has you in his crosshairs from the building across the street. If you draw that weapon, you'll be dead before it clears leather. Scarano looked down to see the red dot dancing over his heart, just as Brad had experienced in the parking garage. Torino sat back in his chair, his expression a mixture of fear and professional respect. You're serious. Dead serious. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You're going to forget Brad Kowalski exists. You're going to tell my wife that you're not interested in collecting debts from me. And you're going to make sure none of your people ever approach me or my property again. Tyler stood, leaving the photographs on the table. In return, I won't eliminate your entire organization as a threat to my continued existence. Torino stared at the pictures of his family, understanding that he'd been completely outplayed by an enemy he'd underestimated. And if I refuse? Tyler's smile was the expression of a predator who'd cornered helpless prey. Then tomorrow morning, you'll wake up to discover that everyone you care about has vanished in the night. Your wife, your daughter, Vincent, your other lieutenants, gone without a trace. He leaned over the table, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than screaming. I spent 12 years making people disappear, Marcus. Entire terror cells would go to sleep and never wake up. You think a small-time loan shark and his crew would present a challenge? Torino looked at Scarano, who was sweating despite the restaurant's air conditioning. The red laser hadn't moved from his chest. We have an understanding, Torino said finally. Tyler nodded and walked toward the door. Oh, and Marcus? When Rebecca calls asking why you're not collecting her husband's debts, tell her exactly what I told you. Word for word. As Tyler left the restaurant, he heard Torino barking orders to his men. Damage control for a situation that had spiraled completely out of their control. Outside, Cruz's voice crackled through his earpiece. Target neutralized. Torino's people are standing down. Tyler smiled grimly as he walked to his car. Rebecca had thought involving organized crime would give her leverage over him. Instead, she'd given him legal justification for eliminating threats to his safety. But more importantly, she'd revealed just how far she was willing to go to destroy him. That knowledge would be crucial for the final phase of his revenge. Because Tyler was done playing defense, it was time for Rebecca to learn what total war actually looked like. Chapter 8. The Final Gambit. Rebecca's world began collapsing on a Tuesday morning when Harvey Gillespie's law firm was raided by the FBI. Tyler watched the news coverage from his war room, satisfied as federal agents carried boxes of evidence from the offices of the lawyer who'd tried to destroy him. Financial fraud, racketeering, conspiracy. Gillespie's looking at 20 years minimum, Cruz reported, monitoring multiple news channels. Turns out your divorce wasn't his only case involving fabricated evidence and witness intimidation. Tyler nodded, but his attention was focused on a different screen showing Rebecca's panicked phone calls. Without Gillespie, her legal strategy had collapsed overnight. No reputable lawyer would touch a case built on such obviously fraudulent evidence. She's desperate, Tyler observed, watching Rebecca pace frantically in her sister's living room through the surveillance feed. Desperate people make mistakes. His phone rang. Rebecca, calling from Karen's house. Tyler, we need to talk. Rebecca's voice was strained, the confident manipulation replaced by genuine fear. Hello, Rebecca. I assume you've heard about Harvey's legal troubles. This is your doing, isn't it? You destroyed my lawyer, turned Torino against me, made Brad disappear. Tyler interrupted her gently. I defended myself against your attacks. There's a difference. Rebecca's voice broke with genuine emotion for the first time in months. What do you want from me? Tyler considered the question carefully. What did he want? Revenge was too simple, too crude for what Rebecca had done to him. She'd systematically tried to destroy not just his marriage, but his life, his reputation, his future. I want justice, Rebecca. I want you to face the consequences of your choices. I'll withdraw the restraining order. Drop the divorce proceedings. We can work this out. No, Tyler said firmly. You crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. You involved organized crime in our personal dispute. You tried to have me framed for domestic violence. You stole money from our joint accounts and committed perjury in court. Rebecca's breathing was audible over the phone. What are you going to do to me? Tyler's voice remained conversational, which somehow made his words more terrifying. I'm going to let you destroy yourself, Rebecca. I'm simply going to stop protecting you from the consequences of your own actions. The line went silent for a long moment. I'm pregnant, Rebecca said suddenly. Tyler felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. What? I'm pregnant, Tyler. 8 weeks. It's yours. Tyler closed his eyes, his mind racing through the implications. If true, this changed everything. A child would complicate any revenge, would require him to maintain some connection to Rebecca for the rest of his life. Prove it, he said finally. What? Prove it's mine. Paternity test, medical records, blood work showing conception dates. If you're carrying my child, I'll know within 24 hours. Rebecca's silence told him everything he needed to know. It's Brad's, isn't it? Tyler asked. That's why you're really desperate. You're pregnant with another man's child, your lawyer's been arrested, and you're facing criminal charges for fraud and perjury. Rebecca's sob was barely audible. Tyler, please. The pregnancy is why Brad disappeared when I confronted him. Tyler continued, pieces falling into place. He knew you were pregnant, knew it might be his, and he couldn't handle the responsibility. Tyler stood and walked to his wall map, tracing Rebecca's movements over the past weeks. How long were you planning to let me believe the child was mine? Until after the divorce settlement? Until you'd taken everything I owned to support another man's baby? It doesn't have to be like this, Rebecca whispered. We can still fix this. Tyler's voice went cold as Arctic wind. No, Rebecca, we can't. You've lied about everything else. Your affair, your evidence, your finances, your motives. Why would I believe you about this? He ended the call and immediately contacted his lawyer. David, I need you to file motions demanding DNA evidence from Rebecca. If she's pregnant, we need to establish paternity before any divorce settlement is finalized. David's voice was careful. Tyler, if the child is yours, then I'll take full custody and raise it properly. But if it's not mine, I want Rebecca prosecuted for attempted fraud. Add it to the perjury charges and the financial theft. Tyler walked upstairs to his kitchen, where he poured himself a drink and stared out at the backyard where he'd once imagined playing with children. Rebecca had poisoned even that dream with her deception. His phone buzzed with a text from Cruz. Rebecca just left her sister's house. She's heading toward downtown. Looks like she's running. Tyler wasn't surprised. With her lawyer arrested, her muscle vanished, and her pregnancy exposed as another manipulation attempt, Rebecca had no moves left except escape. But Tyler had anticipated this too. Cruz, maintain surveillance, but don't intercept. Let her run. She'll lead us to assets she's hidden, people she's involved, evidence we haven't found yet. Copy that. What if she tries to leave the state? Tyler smiled grimly. She won't get far. I've already notified the court that she's a flight risk. There's a hold on her passport, and law enforcement has been alerted to watch for her at airports and border crossings. As night fell, Tyler sat in his war room monitoring Rebecca's desperate flight. She was making exactly the mistakes he'd predicted, withdrawing cash from hidden accounts, contacting people who could incriminate her, creating a digital trail that would make prosecution inevitable. Rebecca had spent months planning his destruction, but she'd never considered what would happen if her plans failed. Now she was learning the difference between manipulation and strategy, between playing games and fighting wars. Tyler had been patient, methodical, and ruthless. He'd turned every weapon she'd used against him back on her, making her destroy herself with her own lies and deceptions. Soon, it would be over. Rebecca would face justice for her crimes, and Tyler would finally be free of the woman who tried to steal his life. But first, he wanted her to understand exactly how completely she'd been defeated. Chapter 9, Ghost Protocol. Rebecca's capture came at dawn on the third day of her flight, when state troopers found her sleeping in her car at a rest stop outside Phoenix. Tyler watched the arrest on live television, feeling no satisfaction, only cold completion of a necessary task. The final confrontation took place in the county jail's visitor room, separated by reinforced glass and monitored by cameras. Rebecca looked haggard, her carefully maintained appearance replaced by the hollow-eyed desperation of someone who'd lost everything. "You look tired," Tyler said, settling into the chair across from her. Rebecca's voice was barely audible through the intercom. "You destroyed my life." "No," Tyler corrected gently. "You destroyed your own life. I simply stopped letting you destroy mine." Rebecca stared at him through the glass, searching for some trace of the man she'd married 16 years ago. "When did you become so cold?" Tyler considered the question seriously. "I think it was when I realized that the woman I loved never existed." "You've been performing our entire marriage, haven't you? Playing the role of devoted wife while planning my destruction." Rebecca's composure cracked, revealing genuine emotion for the first time. "I did love you. At first. But you changed after the deployments. You became distant, cold. I felt like I was married to a stranger. So you decided to betray that stranger instead of trying to save your marriage." Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I made mistakes." "You committed crimes," Tyler interrupted. "Financial fraud, perjury, conspiracy, involving organized crime in a domestic dispute. These weren't mistakes, Rebecca. They were calculated attacks designed to destroy an innocent man." Tyler leaned forward, his pale eyes holding hers through the glass. "Tell me about the baby." Rebecca's face went white. "What baby? The pregnancy test was negative, wasn't it? There never was a baby. That was just another lie to manipulate me into showing mercy." Rebecca's silence confirmed his analysis. Tyler nodded slowly. "Even faced with complete defeat, you couldn't tell the truth. You had to try one more manipulation, one final lie to escape consequences." He stood to leave, but Rebecca's voice stopped him. "What happens now?" Tyler looked back at her, and Rebecca saw something in his expression that made her shrink back from the glass. "Now you pay for what you've done. The district attorney has enough evidence to convict you on multiple felonies. Your hidden bank accounts have been seized. Your house, our house, will be sold to pay legal fees and restitution." Tyler's voice remained conversational, but Rebecca heard the finality in it. "Harvey Gillespie is cooperating with federal investigators to reduce his sentence. He's providing evidence about all the fraudulent cases he's handled, including yours. Marcus Torino is also cooperating, explaining how you tried to use organized crime to intimidate me." Rebecca slumped in her chair, the weight of her situation finally sinking in. "You'll serve probably 5 to 8 years in state prison," Tyler continued. "When you get out, you'll have a felony record, no money, no house, and no husband. You'll be exactly what you accused me of being, alone and broken." Rebecca looked up at him with desperate eyes. "Tyler, please. I know I hurt you, but we had good years together. Doesn't that mean anything?" Tyler studied her face, seeing past the performance to the person beneath. What he found there wasn't evil, just weakness, selfishness, and a complete inability to accept responsibility for her choices. "Those good years mean everything to me, Rebecca. They're why this hurts so much. But they also make your betrayal unforgivable." Tyler placed his hand against the glass, and for a moment Rebecca thought she saw a trace of the man she'd married. "I would have given you anything," he said quietly. "My life, my future, everything I owned. All you had to do was ask. Instead, you chose to steal it through lies and manipulation." He dropped his hand and stepped back from the glass. "Goodbye, Rebecca. I hope prison gives you time to think about the choices that brought you here." As Tyler walked away, Rebecca called out desperately, "Tyler, wait. Please." But he didn't turn back. The ghost had completed his mission, and Tyler Hawkins was finally free to build a life without shadows. Outside the jail, Cruz was waiting by Tyler's car. "How do you feel?" Cruz asked. Tyler considered the question as he looked back at the county jail. Inside, Rebecca would spend the next several years paying for her crimes. Her co-conspirators were facing similar fates. The threat to his life and freedom had been eliminated completely. "Empty," Tyler said finally. "For months, destroying Rebecca's plans gave me purpose. Now that it's over, I'm not sure what comes next." Cruz nodded understanding. "Maybe that's the point. For the first time in years, you get to decide your own future instead of reacting to someone else's agenda." Tyler got into his car and started the engine. As he drove away from the jail, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before his first deployment: possibility. Rebecca had tried to write the ending to his story, casting him as the dangerous veteran destroyed by his own violence. Instead, Tyler had written his own ending, one where justice prevailed and predators faced consequences for their actions. The ghost had completed his final mission. Now Tyler Hawkins could finally come home. Epilogue. 2 years later, Tyler stood in the backyard of his new house, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. The old house, the one Rebecca had tried to steal, had been sold to pay legal fees and restitution. This new place was smaller, but felt more like home than anywhere he'd lived since childhood. His phone buzzed with a text from Cruz, now running his own private security firm. Rebecca's parole hearing was denied. She'll serve the full sentence. Tyler deleted the message without responding. Rebecca belonged to his past now, a lesson learned about the difference between love and performance. He'd kept his promise to himself. He'd never forgiven her betrayal, never taken her back, never shown mercy to someone who'd tried to destroy him through calculated lies. The ghost had taught Rebecca and her allies what happened when predators chose the wrong prey. But Tyler Hawkins was ready to be more than just a weapon forged by betrayal. He was ready to build something new. As the sun climbed higher, Tyler smiled and went inside to start his day. Whatever came next, he would face it on his own terms, with his eyes open and his guard up. Some ghosts were meant to haunt. Others were meant to find peace. Tyler had finally learned the difference. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.